Gypsy. Yes, Gypsy is the king. He is the monarch finally. But with all due respect to His Majesty, the lyrics of Little Black Boy rarely open me. Because I have black roots and I am proud. And I'm going to shout it out anywhere, clear and loud. I repeat, I am proud, very proud of my black ancestry and the contribution they have made to world history. Tell Gypsy, a little black boy was Mandela. He suffered persecution and torture to purge the world of the scourge of apartheid. A little black boy, Pele, king of soccer, Muhammad Ali, a heavyweight boxer, and we all have the old wings like York and Brian Lara. So if Gypsy really want me to be a fan, sing songs to motivate the black man. Little black boy, little black boy, hey, shaka. Hey, yeah, and it's getting. But with all due respect to His Majesty, the lyrics of Little Black Boy rarely open me. Because I have black roots and I am proud. And I'm going to shout it out anywhere, clear and loud. I repeat, I am proud, very proud of my black ancestry and the contribution they have made to world history. Tell Gypsy, a little black boy was Mandela. He suffered persecution and torture to purge the world of the scourge of apartheid. A little black boy, Pele, king of soccer, Muhammad Ali, a heavyweight boxer, and we all have the old wings like York and Brian Lara. So if Gypsy really want me to be a fan, sing songs to motivate the black man. Little black boy, little black boy, hey, shaka. Hey, yeah, and it's getting good. 4 verses and 4 chorus in a winning song. But 4 verses and chorus put the little black boys down. And what about them black boy who work hard and rarely conscious? He didn't differentiate, he attacked all of them hard and vicious. Now I admit many little black boys going astray, but we have to motivate, educate, and show them the way. If they are to make a meaningful contribution, if we really serious about building a strong and vibrant nation, listen man, if the world mathematics, Gypsy, put these facts in your lyrics, so little black boys can be proud of their heritage. Build the first university, it's him not to and from that everybody copy. Today any Jane and John could get a degree. That's why Gypsy song is a sacrilege. To be a little black boy is a privilege. Little black boy, ingenious little black boy. Hey, big guy, so many black role models to choose from living today, and so many more deceased and have passed away. But the example Gypsy using Hikaiso, this is no joke. He's a tout on a maxi taxi, addicted to coke. So he won the crown, he fulfilled his lifelong dream. But in the process he destroyed so many little black boys' self-esteem. Because both the innocent and the guilty, Gypsy put all of them in the same maxi tout category, gypsy. Was Martin Luther King, and until the time of his shooting, he devoted his life fighting for civil rights. A little black boy was all them pharaoh in construction. Them black boys was really pro. How they build the pyramids up to today, scientists don't know. So this song is to stem that negative tide. Them little black boys have a good flip side. Hey, ingenious little black boy. Hey, 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 hey. Hey, 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 hey. Questions for the lover. Why you sing this high so? Is it for the fame and the glory, or just to fill your ego? No. I want to send hope, transmitting a positive message to destroy the myth of that negative little black boy image. So to the black boys of Maloney and Lavanti, to besides all the little black boys in this country, with education, discipline, and ambition, you have the world right there in the palm of your hand. Listen, man, a little black boy, he was Hannibal, a brilliant African general. He defeated mighty Rome in days of old. A little black boy was Winston Springfield, from the ghettos of Lavity, the only musical instrument of the 21st century. So if Gypsy is really to be my king, a positive song like this he has to sing. But them black boy, hey, little black boy, resolute little black boy, ingenious little black boy. Hey, hey, shaka little black boy. Hey, little black boy. Hey, hey, little black boy. A song of hope, little black boy. Hey, little black boy. Hey, hey, you got to get it. Hey. I get a woman, I say, do where you from? She say, man, you can get me at ghetto.com. And mama, oh, still a feeling big and go. Still have more money than singing Cali. She went in jail, and if she father didn't talk. Street, $3,000 brandy, Michael Jordan sneakers on the beat. Sorry. When I see how they want to kill Alos for calling Omar in his calypso. When Manning was living up a sentence, I never hear it consequences. But between you and me, I will have to take my chances. I go beside him, they used to kill anybody. Well then, you know, sprang along would have done dead already. So bring some fire car when you're coming. Oh, bring some fire car when you're coming. I want to teach them young girls something. Shall we say, bring some fire car when you're coming.
Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. Little black boy, little black boy, little black boy. Delamo, 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 little black boy there coming in tonight because we are coming in tonight with the shocking image. The shocking image of a little black boy in the Stabroek News, a cartoon with a little black boy with gun in his hand, saying that that is the future of Guyana. That is the future of Guyana. So we are going to be talking about that and other issues that are affecting the black community tonight. We have as our guest Vincent Alexander and Olive Sampson both of Ipadaji. And we are going to be talking about that cartoon in the Stabroek News. We are going to be talking about that PPP Congress where the issue of blackness was also discussed there. So please share the link. Please share the link and let everyone know that Politics 101 is on. Politics 101 is on. We came in with Delamo. Let's listen to a little bit more. This time, Pink Panther talking about Little Black Boy.
Kobo Jack Sigili and Ellie Manet. Peter James Fisheye, Winston Spree Simon. These little black boys invented the pan. Great calypso legends like Beginner, Lord Invader and Mighty Destroyer, Growler, Tiger, Spoiler, to name a few. These calypsonians were little black boys too. Ivan McWilliams and the legendary George Bailey. These black boys produce some of the best mass in this country. So all who like to associate black with coke and toting and crack, I beg you stop this senseless attack and get off the black boy back. Some people like they does enjoy pulling down the little black boy. They'll use the slightest opportunity to make him feel like he's nobody. This black boy that, this black boy this. Black boy, yeah, have no head for business. They just put love in front, but what they really want is to make him feel insignificant. Is why I just want them to remember Jubal Uriah Buzz Buckler. That little black boy struggled day and night, so that friends today woke us could have rights. And then today I am who I am, thanks to that black boy, Dr. William. That little black boy, we must understand, is the undisputed father of this nation. Ena Robinson, that little black boy from Castara. Today he's the president, may him recover. So all who like to associate black with coke and toting and crack, I beg you stop this senseless attack and get off the black boy back. No, I don't want you to get me wrong. Personally, I love this song, but it must not be used as part of a scheme to assault the little black boy's self-esteem. Cause I remember some years ago, Pretender told us in Calypso, God made us all and in him we trust. Nobody in this world is better than us, like they never hear about Winnie Fred that well. Beryl, Bunny, Penny, and Giselle, Margaret King, Audrey Jeffers, and Jean Pierre. These little black girls have all done their share. Montreal, 1976. A black boy brought us gold at the Olympics. Hasty Crawford brought us so much fame. Today our national stadium carries his name. Lara Bishop, York, Stafford, Dillon, and Addo Bolden. These black boys continue to bring us worldwide attention. So all who like to associate black with cocaine, cocaine, and crack, I beg you stop this senseless attack and get off the black boy back. Now it had a certain part in your song. You asked the little black boy to look around and see all who is doctor, who is lawyer, and who is banker. As though the black boy have no degree, like he never go university. As though his intellectual capacity is strictly consistent with URP, like they never hear about CLRJs. One of our top intellectual names, Dr. J. the Elder and Olaf Bliss, Bosco Holder and Sidney Francis, Undine Giuseppe and Cyril Neptune, the Ricky Tiki Man, Barnabas Fortune, Lord Larry Constantine and Sylvan Bones. These little black boys are our heroes. If I should sing about all the great little black boys that I know, I will never ever finish singing this calypso. So all who like to associate black with cocaine, cocaine, and crack, I beg you stop this senseless attack and get off the black boy back.
Oh yes, Pink Panther, get off the black man's back. Tonight we are playing these calypsos because in our Guyana, they are on the black boys' back again. Last night I was on the Mark Benshop show, and it was brought to my attention that in the May 9th edition of the Stabroek News, that they publish a cartoon showing a black boy with gun in hand, apparently attacking people, and on his back there was poverty and Guyana's future. Again, and I say again, because in July of 2012, the Guyana Chronicle published an editorial that said that the PNC was socializing black boys to be criminals waiting to attack East Indians. And some of us took to the streets. I remember Lincoln Lewis, Mark Benshop, Freddie Kissoon was there. We took to the streets and we highlighted that matter. We collected as many Guyana Chronicle, copies of the Chronicle that we could pick up. And we burned them. At the square of the Revolution. Eventually, the person who penned that editorial was fired, and the editor who allowed the editorial to be published was disciplined. And now we have the Stabroek News. The Stabroek News with this unpleasant, racially insensitive, racially insensitive, racially insensitive, racially insensitive cartoon, again depicting the black boy as a criminal. There is the cartoon there in the middle. There is the cartoon there in the middle, depicting the little black boy as a criminal. When will it end? When will it end? As the Calypsonian says, why always depicting the black man, black people as criminals? Earlier this afternoon, Ipadaji issued a statement, followed by the WPA issuing a statement. Both statements condemned the cartoon, and they have called, both organizations have called for an apology. In the case of the WPA, calling for an apology from the Stabroek News, and that whoever penned that cartoon, drew that cartoon, that person should be disciplined, and the functional superior who caused it to be published should also be disciplined. We are drawing attention to this because for the last 4 years under this present government, we have had this incessant attack on the African Guyanese community. Recently, former President Granger, who doesn't speak very much on these matters, pointed out that there is a concerted attack on Ipadaji. Monies were withdrawn from Ipadaji. Monies that were given to Ipadaji in pursuit of the International Decade of the People of African Descent. Not money to share out to the African Guyanese community, but to facilitate training and other endeavors to get Black people integrated into the wider society. The objective of the decade was to deal with the lingering racism that Black people all over the world face. The United Nations said, despite laws, despite changes since colonialism, institutional racism continue to plague Black people all over the world. And they called on states, governments, to do something about it. Our government has done nothing about it. Instead, it has withdrawn the subvention, a miserly subvention, from the organization that was tasked with ensuring these reforms happen. Good evening to you. Please share the link. We are ready to roll. We are ready to talk all things Black tonight. Because this confounded nonsense must stop. Why in 2024? Why in 2024 must we have this kind of imagery? This imagery is portraying the Black man, the Black boy, as a criminal. And it is this kind of imagery that frames the response, the attitude of the state to little Black boys. That is why when police confront a little Black boy, they shoot him, often to death. Sisters and brothers, we have come too far. We have come too far to allow this nonsense to continue to happen. I've said on this program that I think we in the political opposition have abandoned African Guyanese in pursuit of our electoral imperatives. And as such, the little black boy, the little black girl, and all black people are vulnerable to these attacks. There's a certain kind of ignorance about race in this society, an ignorance about race that allows somebody in the media to put this in a newspaper. WPA also called for training of our media people on race. We are ready to help. IPADG and other organizations are ready to train our media people on race because they're ignorant about race. Only ignorance about race would allow somebody to do a cartoon like this and put it in a newspaper. We don't talk about race, and when we talk about it, it's to condemn those of us who try to put it in the public space. We are called racist. And so therefore, we have this kind of atrocity. Let's go. Let me bring in our guests. We are ready. We've kept them waiting long enough. Vincent, good evening. Olive, good evening.
Good evening, good evening, good evening to your viewers.
Good evening to your viewers, and thank you for inviting us to be here tonight.
Olive, let me start off with you. And IPADG has issued a statement condemning the publication of this cartoon, and you made some observations in that statement. Please bring to us what the message of your statement.
David, I can read the letter to the editor so that our viewers can have the entire thing. I hope that newspapers will carry it tomorrow widely, because we really want the world to know precisely what is going on here in Guyana, as you pointed out, in 2024. Really, it is because people have contacted us, our members and others, horrified that this is occurring. And so in response to that, we've issued this letter to all editors and journalists so that they can, perhaps reading it is not necessary, but I'd like to just explain. I'm glad that you were able to share the image. It's insulting, it is offensive to all people of African descent, because in a way it depicts us, male or female. Your calypso spoke to little black boys, but this is about black people in general. Right as we were celebrating Mother's Day, etc., this is what comes out, that, you know, black boys are out there as criminals. And why? So it's something that's attacking our community in its entirety. In we at IPADG, looking at it, felt that it ought to do more than that. The cartoon focused on the crime of people of African descent. It doubles down on the constant appearances in the newspapers of images of black people handcuffed, appearing in court, being arrested. It is daily, we see that. A well sort of burnished stereotype of the black criminal. What, for IPADG, we are focused on, in our work on the decade, dismantling these stereotypes and helping to explain how we arrived there. I think that your audience should be aware of the fact that at emancipation in 1838, the British created a police force. Why did they not have a police force while we were enslaved? Right? The police force, not the police service. Notice, our police here are not referred to as a service to the community, but a force. And that nomenclature, I think, is very telling. Here we are, we have a police force established in 1839, right after emancipation. And the purpose was, how do you control these now freed Africans? And when we see persons being hauled through the courts, we have to remember that this is an outcome of that British colonial period where laws were put in place to oppress people of African descent, which is part of the work of the decade, dismantling the remnants, the legacies of slavery, the legacies of colonialism that continue to oppress us. Right. So this image depicts something that we are very much fighting against, right? Fighting against the stereotypes, fighting against a system that is still very much includes and enshrines the British colonial legacy of oppression of the Black man, oppression of the African descendant community. What is further startling to us is that that crime in Guyana, the crime that is depicted in the cartoon, suggests that if had it not been for the crime that is committed by people of African descent, that there would be no crime. And this is the worst thing that's happening in our society. I want to make it clear that crime is crime and crime is not acceptable. But what we have to know is that there's white collar crime that is absolutely destructive to our society, absolutely destructive to our economy, and it is rampant in Guyana. I'd like to just, for the sake of our discussion, read for the viewers the FBI's definition of what is white collar crime. The term white collar, if you'll permit me, David, I'd like to.
Yes, please do.
Mm-hmm. The term white collar crime was reportedly coined in 1939 and has since become synonymous with the full range of frauds committed by business and government professionals. White collar crime is generally non-violent in nature and includes public corruption, healthcare fraud, mortgage fraud, money laundering, and that's their definition. Others that I've looked at talked about unfair labor practices, theft of persons' real estate property, misrepresentation in advertising, and corruption. Now, those crimes affect us, every single one of us, every single day, and they're affecting our economy. They're a drag on our economy. They make it impossible for the government to deliver services as it should because its coffers are drained by those, right? And when a person goes into a transaction, for example, in the private sector, and comes away dissatisfied because what was marketed to them is not what they received, that is a form of crime. Now, we should, in this country, determine to fight all crime. And our point is twofold. One, that there should be, again, this question of disaggregated data, disaggregated by ethnicity, so that we understand what is happening in the society and how it can be corrected. What is the nature of white collar crime in Guyana? What is its impact on our economy? Who commits white collar crime? What is the nature of blue collar crime? Blue collar crime is crime committed by persons, by working persons, and it is usually in response to some kind of personal need. And then, of course, we have street crime, which is the one that we see most often depicted in the newspapers, where, we have murder, rape, violent crimes, and robberies. Street crime. Which of these affects our economy more? And we want all of it eliminated. I want to hasten to say that no one is saying we really understand that crime ought to be addressed, but we ought to address all crime. And the depiction of a Black male as the epitome of crime in Guyana is not only insensitive, racist, dishonest, but it is also, it's dishonest because it negates, it ignores the real crime issues in Guyana, the breadth of crime, who commits it, and its cost to our society. So we are calling for a collection of data, right? Disaggregated by ethnicity and type of crime. And we're also calling on Stabroek News and other media entities to utilize the power of their platform, right, to address these wider crimes, to do a study, to expose the public to the nature of white collar crime, particularly because it is rampant and it is huge and it is affecting our economy. And because it affects our economy, it really drives the rate of poverty up because of the fact that there is not sufficient, the pie is not being evenly cut so that persons can be brought out of poverty.
Sister Olive Sampson commenting on that offensive cartoon that we have been putting on the screen. Vincent, as I bring you in, let me read a little bit from the WPA statement. WPA is appalled at a racially insensitive cartoon published in the Stabroek News May 9th edition and calls for universal condemnation of this publication. While the cartoonists may have intended to highlight the high crime rate in Guyana, the assigning of a racial face to it is most counterproductive to race relations in general and an assault on the dignity of African Guyanese. Not for the first time, African Guyanese have been shamed by a section of the media which have generally been too flippant on the race question. WPA recalls the equally racially insensitive editorial in the July 3rd, 2012 edition of the state-owned Guyana Chronicle, which opined that the then political opposition was socializing African Guyanese men as criminals to attack Indian Guyanese. Your reaction to this cartoon, and if you can put it in its larger context, Vincent Alexander.
Thank you very much, David. David, the more things change, the more they remain the same. During the period of post-emancipation and the coming of others other than the people of African descent, one of the mechanisms used by the colonizers was to portray people of African descent as being brutish, ignorant, uncultured, and all of the negatives one would think about. That portrayal was intended to pit other ethnic groups against the people of African descent in an attempt to maintain a status quo of oppression of all peoples other than the colonizers themselves. Stereotyping of the people of African descent was heavy and institutional. And what we are witnessing today in the form of that cartoon and many other things is a continuation of that stereotyping of the people of African descent, thus inculcating a prejudicial disposition to the people of African descent by other ethnic groups, aimed fundamentally as being able to retain an oppressive system. Oppression which incidentally does not only affect the people of African descent, it affects all. What it seeks to do is to pacify and placate the others on the contention that the problem is the people of African descent who are brutal, cultured, and everything that's bad, and everything that's negative. David, the United Nations in the Declaration of the Decade sought to, has identified that coming down from the Durban Conference, that this kind of xenophobia, this kind of ethnic discrimination has continued even though we have gained independence and become a republic. And there is need for action to be taken against these institutionalized forms. For a newspaper to publish a cartoon like that means there is something about the institution, its policies that facilitates that. And the UN speaks specifically to the need for institutional reform as we seek to overcome the way in which people of African descent have been historically treated in many regards as less than human beings. What a cartoon like that does comes up against one of the themes of the decade, recognition. The decade calls for recognition in addition to justice and development. What recognition can the people of African descent have if we continue to perpetuate a stereotype of the people of African descent as people who are brutal, who are violent, and who are the ones involved in street crime, in brutal crime? So that what we're perpetuating is an environment in which the people of African descent will not be accorded due recognition for who they actually are, for the role they have played in our society, and are seen to be merely criminals. And I must say, David, that this has been perpetuated not only in that cartoon is but an example. But we have had the situation, for example, where coming up to our elections, someone who is now a vice president of this country has gone public to tell the people of Guyana and other ethnic groups in particular that they have to be careful about our army of people of African descent who will come kicking their doors down and who will come being murderous towards them. So this is an institutionalized campaign against people of African descent perpetrated by those who would like to continue the oppression for their benefit. And this problem lies squarely at the feet of a vice president and of a party which he leads, because they have not only facilitated and are facilitating, but themselves are guilty of this stereotyping of the people of African descent, driving fear into others through that process, fear into the Indian Guyanese population, into the Amerindian Guyanese population, and using that fear to control those people. We heard the vice president recently referring to this question of fear and attempting to say that there is an attempt to control the people of African descent by fear. But the best examples of control by fear comes from him and his continuous portrayal of the people of African descent and the army in particular as a dangerous force in relation to other peoples, Indo-Guyanese and the Afro-Guyanese and the Amerindian Guyanese. And by virtue of that, seeking to maintain control over those people for political and other purposes. I have a clear recollection, life experience of the way in which this impacted our Amerindian brothers and sisters. During the period of the 2005 crime wave, when that period was used to perpetuate this disposition that the people of African descent are criminals, those of us who befriended Amerindian peoples, very often when we arrived in those villages, the villages seemed to be desolate, uninhabited. What was the reality? Amerindian people went into hiding because the arrival of Black people meant that the arrival of criminals had occurred. That is the kind of division, that is the kind of disposition that is inculcated in relation to the people of African descent. A national newspaper should know better and do better than to portray anything which continues to perpetuate the feeling that the people of African descent, as has been perpetuated from the time of the arrival of others, are brutal, are violent, are uncultured, are to be feared. They owe it to us to have a simple understanding that the international community at large has recognized the ills perpetrated against the people of African descent, and that one of those ills is institutional arrangements, including that the newspaper could publish such a cartoon that continued to damn us, to vilify us, and that our liberation requires recognition, which cannot come on the back of such cartoons. Our liberation requires the history being taught in schools so that other ethnic groups can come to understand and appreciate the role the people of African descent have played in the development of Guyana. And so that the government, which continues to contend that everything is hunky-dory, there's no need for a special program in relation to the decade, the people of African descent should come to recognize that when we call for a special program, we are calling for programs that can address the lack of recognition based on this type of stereotyping, institutional stereotyping, the lack of injustice, and the lack of development, which are real. We are seeing them on a daily basis. And it must be either an act of hypocrisy or an ally of the perpetration of these ills that would make a government contend that there's no need for a special program. Telling us that we can apply for loans like anyone else, telling us that we can get education like anyone else, does not solve the problem of stereotyping that poisons the minds of people against the people of African descent. The nation needs medicine and remedial action to provide the African Guyanese equal space and equal recognition to participate in and benefit from the patrimony and largesse of this country.
Vincent Alexander, very strong words there, along with Olive Sampson, the CEO of ITPADG. Vincent, of course, is the chairman of ITPADG. Sister Olive, as I bring you in, let me read another excerpt from the statement by the WPA. It says, the cartoon suggestion that crime is a consequence of poverty cannot be denied. But the image of a black man with gun in hand, apparently attacking citizens who are begging for their lives, is racially loaded. The image of African aggression and the consequent fear from other ethnic groups can only feed already strained race relations. Further, the cartoon's location of this imagery in the context of Guyana's future is explosive, to say the least. This is an image that has been utilized throughout the world over time to criminalize African people, which in turn frames the violent approach of the police, the criminal justice system, and other state agencies to African men in particular. Sister Olive Sampson, the use of this imagery in framing policy, in framing the response of the police, the response of the criminal justice system, the response of the state in general. You had started to talk about that in your original remarks. Please expand.
Well, the use of the imagery buttresses, I think, it allows for the state to respond, to continue to respond in very harsh ways to people of African descent and to ignore the crimes of others. It's convenient because society has been already conditioned to expect that people of African descent would be the ones, excuse me, would be those who commit crimes. What is really the irony of it all is that and one of your audience commented on this, excuse me, our very arrival to these shores is the result of a crime against humanity that is as yet not addressed. And systems that have been put in place that double down on that crime and keep us oppressed, deny us opportunities to learn about our history and to have others with whom we coexist learn about that history so that their impression of us can be corrected. Part of the whole notion of gaining independence and breaking colonial ties was the dismantling of a system that was destructive to the persons colonized. Right? I believe that efforts towards that end were made after independence, but those efforts have been slowly eroded and completely abandoned. And in fact, we are fast returning to, if we have not completely returned to what we are now we are in a neo-colonial state. All of the attitudes, all of the divisions by class and wealth, they're returning, where we have a narrow band of extremely wealthy people, excuse me, who govern and who cannot be questioned, and a growing pool, a part of our population that is impoverished, right? And so these kinds of cartoons will obviously flourish. It shows the attitude that is now, I think, prevalent and rampant in our society. We, as Vincent pointed out, the work of the decade was to further the dismantlement of all of these legacies, to highlight them, to bring them to our attention, and to say to society, here is where you have been, here is where we have been wrong and where we need to make the corrections. We need to ensure that people of African descent are treated fairly. The stereotypes that are manufactured by our enslavers and those who stole our labor, stole us and our labor, those stereotypes were supposed to be in place so they put them in place so they could oppress us and completely destroy us for their purposes, so that we just be animals of burden, hewers of water and no more, right? We're somehow, I think, in a way, seeing that if we don't watch, or if we are not vigilant and take action, we are going to return to that state. because a cartoon like that could only be considered and published if there is a comfort level with the environment, that the environment is receptive, excuse me, to that view.
Sister Olive Sampson, there weighing in on our discussion here tonight of that damning cartoon in the Stabroek News. And go ahead, Olive.
David, I paused because I was coughing, so
Yes,
forgive me.
go ahead.
I would just like to conclude by, again, being attentive to the comments by the audience, and where someone said that the United Nations will not come here to solve our problems, right? And in fact, no one will. You know, we saw the fly overhead last week of 2 American jets, fighter jets. You know, even in that case, with the case of Venezuela, no one is coming to solve our problems. We as Guyanese have to solve our own problems. And we have to take note of every single incident that is destructive to the image of African Guyanese. And I'm saying that, others should perhaps do the same. But in our instance, our focus is people of African descent. That is our remit. And I think that so many times persons encounter situations where they have been ill-treated, where they suffer white-collar crime, etc., but they do not report it for fear, etc. We need to know that kind of information. It needs to, we all have to be vigilant. We all have to be militant, because no one is coming to our rescue but ourselves. Ourselves. Only we can save ourselves.
Only we can save ourselves. Vincent, Alexander, of course, whenever these things happen, we often look for ways and means to respond to them. Let me read another section of the WPA statement and have you come in on what do we do in the short term. WPA is carefully characterizing the cartoon as racially insensitive, but also wishes to point out that one of the standard definitions of racism is the attaching of negative labels to particular ethnic groups. We therefore call on the Stabroek News to, in the first instance, apologize to the African Guyanese community. Nothing short of that should suffice. WPA is also recommending that media personnel undergo training in racial sensitization. The habit of avoiding conversations on race in the public sphere and characterizing those who do so as racist have led to a palpable ignorance of this central component of our national being. Finally, WPA calls for some form of discipline to be meted out to the author of the cartoon and the functional superior who gave the permission to publish it. Vincent, Alexander, what is to be done in the short term?
This reminds me of an incident in the 70s, somewhere around 78. The People's National Congress official organ, the nation, published an article headline, "Sugar workers never had it so good." Mm-hmm. Might not be the exact words, but that was what the headline implied. Sugar workers never had it so good. You know what happened? That editor, Mr. Skeffers, I think his name was fired immediately. And the news circulation of that newspaper was withdrawn because it was felt that it was an insult to the Indo-Guyanese for the paper to carry such a headline. The Indians never had it so good, as if they weren't worthy of what they were having and weren't worthy of more. So that's my first response, because it's parallel to what you just said, that the newspaper has an obligation in the circumstance to recognize that they have gone down the wrong road, to apologize to this nation and to the people of African descent, and to censor, at minimum, the person who may have authored and allowed the publication of that cartoon. The issue of racism here is critical, David. Racism is defined as a system where one group of people see themselves to be superior to another group of people, and there are consequential things based on that superiority. To portray one group of people as being criminals implicitly portray others as superior human beings because of their superior embrace of values that are that push back against criminality. So that cartoons like these can be the basis for perpetration and perpetuation of racism, insofar as they encourage people to see themselves as superior and therefore to mete out inferior treatment to others. So it is critical that we understand that there is a process here of education that is critical. Education where one understands the broad concepts such as racism, and therefore could recognize when those concepts are at work and consciously push back on those concepts. In that regard, I want to reference to an Italian anthropologist who's often seen as the author of criminology anthropology. And his name is Lombroso. Lombroso. Kaiser Lombroso, who in 1876 established a biological theory of criminology, which suggests that criminality is inherited and that someone born criminal could be identified by the way they look. In doing that, Lombroso specified that one of the features that identified someone to be a criminal was a big, broad nose. He identified that people of African descent, by virtue of their physical features, were inherently criminals. So what we have here today is a cartoon that portrays the black man. So inherently the black man is the criminal. Taking us back to Lombroso's 1876 biological theory that suggests that people are born criminals. And so this black man, who is the example of a criminal, is not only the example of a criminal, but typifies the people who are criminals. So that we need, in our circumstances, for each and every one who thinks otherwise to be vocal on this issue. Our Indian brothers and sisters, our Amerindian brothers and sisters, can be seen to be complicit if they do not vocally distance themselves from this cartoon. If they don't, they can be seen to be implicitly complicit, agreeing, and therefore not be brothers and sisters in arms. I may have various interpretations of what one Guyana means. But if by any chance one Guyana means that we are equal, and that among us all they may be criminals, all ethnic groups, but among us all they may be good people, then the person who articulates one Guyana should be out there condemning, as he condemns other things that are in the public domain, condemning this cartoon, PPP that is so rife when it comes to matters that they see they should not embrace, in publishing all sorts of disclaimers and all sorts of articles. It should be on the front page if they are really serious about all Guyanese being equal. This cartoon, as negative as it might be, provides us with an opportunity as a nation to come forth in terms of what we really believe in by articulating what we believe in and committing ourselves to what we believe in. In the absence of that, others will be judged harshly.
Would be judged harshly.
Yeah.
Clearly,
Mhm.
this incident buttresses our call to the teaching of history in our schools. A history which will say that we disagree with Lombroso. You know, those of our people who are at the university doing sociology, it should be integral to their teaching that we disagree with Lombroso, we disagree with racism, and we disagree with racism founded on the inferiority of one set of people, an inferiority that is recognized barely by their physical being rather than the way in which they have conducted themselves historically and contributed equally, if not more than equally, to the development of our society.
When development was said. Olive, you were about to say something?
Yes, I wanted to just bring to your attention, to that of the audience, sort of doubling down on my earlier point about an atmosphere, an environment that has been created that makes this kind of cartoon, the publishing of this cartoon, possible. Where we've been conditioned, and they, it seems to be just accepted that these stereotypes of Black people are indeed fact. I don't know if you are aware, but earlier this month, the Ministry of Education retracted an essay competition that they had announced
Yes.
about the daily breakfast program, meal, whatever meal. But in announcing it, they had put out a flyer. A daily breakfast helped me in school. And the child depicted on the flyer is a little Black girl. A little Black girl is the only child that you can fully see, suggesting that Black children are those who require hot meals. Now, if you're following the press, you will also know that the government was speaking very proudly of its meals programs across the hinterland communities. So not only across the coastal regions, but in the hinterland communities. So why is it that a Black child is depicted in this brochure, in this flyer, about my a daily breakfast helped me in school? So there's this drumbeat there's this, and there are other instances. I just wanted to bring that to your attention. This is a very recent one. There have been posters around Georgetown where, where you see this is about education and educational success. And there's not a Black child present. They're Indo-Guyanese entirely. So we have to be very vigilant. This atmosphere is dangerous to people of African descent. It, as Vincent earlier pointed out, it is counter the goal of the decade with respect to recognition, and is in fact, in many ways, returning us to a position that we have struggled to get past. The struggle is greater now than it has ever been. And I think our people need to be vigilant, and they need to be active and not wait for someone else. And while IPADG is going to try its utmost to do its work, we certainly can benefit from volunteers who can assist us, because we are small in number and the task is huge.
The task is huge. Vincent, a couple of minutes ago, I put a comment by one of our viewers on the screen about fascism, your reference to the Italian criminologist. And I want to draw you in on this question of the rise of the fascist state in Guyana. And I want you to tie our discussion here on this cartoon in with it, but also what took place at the PPP's Congress with the removal from the constitution of quote-unquote Marxism, Leninism, and socialism, but leaving in place democratic centralism. I remember a couple of years ago when Coffee 250 made the intervention that we are in an emerging apartheid state. All hell broke loose. The government went berserk. Some of our own people felt that we had stepped a little bit too far. Today, it's normal for our people to refer to this state as an apartheid state. Are we stepping out too much in terms of our characterization of an emerging fascist state in Guyana?
First of all, let me be clear that what you have asked about is not an extant fascist state, but an emergent fascist state, which means that there are processes that are unfolding,
yes,
that can take us ultimately to be a fascist state. So let me first of all be clear about that. I think it's more than coincidental that you're having this kind of cartoon coming out when some other things are happening, because all of these things are related to thought processes and to ideas that are dominant. When one speaks about fascism in simple language, it speaks to a political idea where the government seeks to control everything. A political idea where the government seeks to control everything and not allow people to say or to do what they would wish to say or do unless it is in conformity with what the government wishes to have said or to have done. Simple layman idea. Now, if the government does not push back against this cartoon, in the context of the fascism I speak about, one could argue that this is what they would like to have said or like to have done. And so we come to the question, can it be argued that that is so? Can it be argued that there is elements of fascism emerging in our society? go back to the question. Fascism really speaks about total control. What we have witnessed in our society is the government seeking to exercise total control. And that starts at the highest level in our society, the parliament. Whilst it is a talk shop, the reality is in the parliament that only what the government says prevails. Only what the government says prevails. Under a chairmanship, Speaker of the National Assembly, who is on record as saying the government, the opposition gets its say and the government gets its way. So there's an acceptance, a virtual, ideational, ideological acceptance that the government has a right to total control because the opposition may have its say, but the government gets its way. And not only has he said that, not only does he preside over a parliament, but he presides over a parliament which does exactly that. The government gets its say, its way, and the opposition is only entitled to say. And so we see the control element there. But fascism's control is beyond just what happens in a parliament, where there is collective action. Fascism control is related to a very large extent also to an individual emerging as the maximum leader who virtually exercises ultimate control. And you know, interesting, the term ultimate control is associated with sovereignty. And it says that a sovereign state means the people exercising ultimate control. And here I am presenting the opposite, an individual exercising ultimate control. And that exercise of ultimate control becomes easily possible when you have an electoral system which allows for the representative list to determine who sits in parliament. And for that body of people who sit in parliament to be seen to be a parliament or parliamentarians of a party, which party embraces democratic centralism, which means that they are obligated to the decisions of the party, that it is indiscipline for them to go against, speak against decisions of the party. And democratic centralism further goes on to specify that there is some singularity in terms of the decision-making process, because not only are the decisions made at the top, but the decisions are made largely influenced and made by one individual. And we see that manifestation not only in our parliamentary arrangements, but we see that manifestation every Thursday when one person speaks to this nation about everything governmental, everything. And not only does he speak about everything governmental as if he's speaking on behalf of, but he has made it clear that the government is a PPP government and that he is the general secretary of the PPP. So he's established that hierarchy, the party above the government, and he is the boss of the party. So we see where that singularity exists, both in terms of democratic centralism, which embraces the singularity and decision-making at the top, and the way the party is organized and who sits at the top. And so you're seeing these elements of fascism facilitated by this democratic centralism. And therefore, when the party says to us they have abandoned Marxism and Leninism, and some people get up and say, well, things are getting better. Well, the People's Progressive Party abandoned Marxism, Leninism a long time in terms of its economic policies. It has embraced neoliberalism for the longest while. So whether they take it out of the constitution or not, there's nothing about them Marxists in terms of their economics. But they have not taken out democratic centralism. So they have retained that element which facilitates the emergence of fascism. That element has been retained. So where are we as Guyanese benefiting from what they have done at their Congress? Absolutely no benefit. All they have done is to pander to the West by saying, you had problems with us in the past. We were Marxist, Leninists. We are no longer Marxist, Leninists. We've gotten rid of that. But they have not gotten rid of democratic centralism, which facilitates an oligarchy and which facilitates that party to be determined in what happens even in the context of the neoliberal economy that we're supposed to have. Because they now can dictate the policies, that fashions, that facilitates the existence of private enterprise. And in that context, though it is called private enterprise, it is subject to the oligarchy and to the centralism because the politics is still about control. And more than just being about control, it's about control from a center and control from an individual, which is manifest in other ways. Our electoral system facilitates its construction. The way in which the parties can control the councillors in the democratic organs facilitates that kind of centralism as well. And the fact that we are told that the leaders of this country have no time to waste speaking to democratic organs, but they speak to the people directly, is establishing that one-manship, that maximum leadership, which is identifiable with fascism. And I dare say that when one looks at the history in terms of how we've had extrajudicial killings, the role the police force has been made to play in terms of acting outside of the rule of law and being extrajudicial, then that too brings other elements of fascism into play. And you know what, David? If we continue to perpetuate images of African Guyanese inferiority and other Guyanese superiority, then again, we are seeing the construct of the things which are fascist. Because fascism is also associated sometimes with nationalism, and nationalism can be seen in the context of, in a nation, one group prevailing as the superior group with its maximum leader. Let's not be fooled about elections. Hitler was elected. So let's not be fooled about elections. Fascists can be elected.
That's right.
We are in a very precarious situation where the signs on the horizon are very, very negative signs and points to the emergence of a fascist state in a situation where a lot of our structures can facilitate and in some regards give legitimacy to that fascism.
Vincent Alexander here, speaking on the signs of the emergence of a fascist state in Guyana. My God, the coming of oil, the coming of wealth to Guyana. They talked about all the curses and so forth. But it seems as though Guyana has invented its own peculiar curses that that come with oil. Sister Sampson, as we wind down this program, you in the statement, a apology statement, it puts a burden on the media to begin to question more the activities of the government and the state. I want to ask you in closing to really address the African Guyanese people, because it's a cartoon, and as we say, sometimes this too shall pass. But often these things have a long trail that they leave in their wake, and the consequences never go away. You can tell by the comments here by the viewers on this program that this is an issue that is not going away. Speak to African Guyanese people and in the wake of this cartoon and how they should, as we would say, move.
Thank you, David. I think that, and I was reading the comments as well, and I'm glad to see that people have been paying attention and are equally dismayed, disgusted, and insulted that the Stabroek News would choose to endorse, if in fact, this cartoon, because it's an endorsement that they utilize their very precious publishing space to put that forward and to send a message to African Guyanese that this is who we think you are. And I think we have to push back against this kind of thing as African Guyanese. I think there are several things we need to do. I think one, we have to not assume that everyone in our circle is aware that this has happened and understands its impact. So we have to do some teaching among the persons with whom we come in contact within our circles, making sure that we all see and understand. I'm sorry, just a second. I'm sorry, that we all see and understand this. Because in order for us to move forward as one, we have to have a shared understanding of the terrain across which we are traversing. It is a terrain that is fraught with all kinds of horrific stereotypes about us. We have to fight those, and we have to fight those not only by telling people who we are, we have to teach them our history. We have to first learn our history. It is so critical. I encourage your audience to go to the Ipadaji Facebook page. Ipadaji and friends, Ipadaji Coordinating Council members and friends of Ipadaji did a visit this weekend to the 1763 sites. Some of them where Kofi and those others who rose up against their enslavement, where they fought, where they established a republic that lasted for almost a year. And so when people understand how we got here, what we have done to establish this nation, what we have done in spite of our enslavement to be where we are today, I think it provides us with the kind of power that we need to move forward. We have to move forward in unison. And this is not about party unison. This is about unison as people of African descent, confronting what is, to me, our erasure, our destruction as a people in this society. I think it's that we are at our darkest hour. We should not await for it to get darker. And it starts among us, teaching ourselves to be, so we are more vigilant and we stand up and we speak out. We must speak out against this kind of an attack, an insult to us and our ancestors.
To our ancestors and to those of us who are here today. Vincent Alexander, your closing thoughts.
This cartoon provides us with a moment of awakening. I always try to get the positives out of the situation. This cartoon provides us with a moment of awakening. We should understand that this is about the people of African descent not juxtaposing themselves to anyone else, but seeking recognition, justice, and development as the United Nations recognize we are worthy of and should work with us to achieve. We have recognized that based on our activism, that there has been a pushback, and we recognize that that pushback may come in the form of crumbs that some people may consume because of their state of poverty. What we need to do is to recognize that those crumbs are not originally available, and they're only part of a strategy to give us the impression that there is concern. Any real concern has to be manifest in addressing the institutions and the laws that have disadvantaged people of African descent. And in the instance where we have already addressed those laws, already addressed those institutions, equitable action. Because even though a law may project us all as being equivalent, if we have a disadvantage in terms of where we stand, then we cannot equally benefit from that law or that institution. So what Guyana needs is a review of its institutions, a review of its laws, a determination of where change is required, and where change is required, and in relation to where change is not required, equitable opportunities for people of African descent. We are not questioning what is in terms of whether there are certain loans available and all of that. We're not questioning that. We're questioning what is in relation to where we stand. Do we have an equitable opportunity to benefit from what is? Do we have an opportunity to benefit where the what is perpetuates the discrimination that has come down even from the period of slavery? Are we paying attention to the health of African Guyanese as a special issue, given the way in which we are affected by certain diseases more than others? I'm not saying don't attempt the diseases of others, but the point I'm making is that we are ignoring things that affect African Guyanese, which have an historical origin and which need to be addressed to give us the kind of equality for us to continue to contribute and to benefit from the patrimony and the development of this place we call our home.
Our own Vincent Alexander, chairman of ITPADG, and Olive Sampson, the CEO of ITPADG, here tonight on this issue of this damning cartoon in the Stabroek News. And we also touched on the signs of an emerging fascist state in Guyana. We're going to continue this conversation because it will not go away, and we should not be a one-day pony. We will continue to cover this issue in the coming days. Vincent, thank you very much. Olive, thank you also very much for coming on at short notice. And
thank you for allowing us this opportunity to continue the work of ITPADG. And I hope all Guyanese are listening to what's emerging in our society, and if they're truly Guyanese, taking heed to what's emerging.
What's emerging? Thank you very much, Vincent, and thank you, Olive, and I will be in touch with you. And to you, our audience, you're always extremely helpful in keeping our program going. I don't like to be personal about these things, but I have been banned from the pages of the Stabroek News. They don't carry my letters. And I rather suspect it has to do with my stance from 2020, when I did not jump on the bandwagon and to accuse Mr. Mingo and others of rigging an election. I took a different view of the 2020 election, and Stabroek News has, in effect, banned me from their pages. Even recently, I did a letter on Brother UC's 99th birthday. They refused to carry it. Ravidev attacked Brother Guyana. I responded to him. They refused to carry it. Those are the last two that I sent. It's their paper, and they determine who they carry and who they don't carry. But you can, if you can carry a racist cartoon, you can carry a racist cartoon, but you ban David Hines from your letter section, but you can carry a racist cartoon. It says a lot about where we are going in this country, and the future of our country. Here's hoping Stabroek News does the right thing on this issue and really address what is sure to become a firestorm in the coming days. We cannot have a leading newspaper carry cartoons like that. Oh, how we yearn for a David de Caries. I can say, I didn't know David de Caries well. I met him several times, but in passing, our conversations were short. But I can tell you that David de Caries would not have allowed a cartoon of this nature to be published. David de Caries would not have banned David Hines from Stabroek News, however quote-unquote controversial it may be. But the editorial and other leadership of Stabroek News have to really come good and clear the air. Protest in front of Stabroek News office, 10 a.m. sharp this Friday. There's a protest in front of the Stabroek News office at 10 o'clock in the morning this Friday. We are going to talk more about that tomorrow. Protests in front of Stabroek News office on Friday at 10 o'clock. We're going to discuss this in further detail tomorrow. I want to thank Mark Benchop for drawing it to my attention, because I had not seen the cartoon. I had not seen it. I don't usually look at the cartoon section. And last night I was on Mark's program, he drew it to my attention. And so let's keep up this fight. Let us keep up the struggle, because our very survival. Next week, Aubrey Norton is going to be back. There's a lot of controversy over what he said about street protests on the program on Monday night. And he will come back to clarify what he thinks is a misunderstanding of his position. We're going to do that next week. But tomorrow and Friday, we continue our coverage of that racially insensitive Stabroek News cartoon. Racially insensitive Stabroek News cartoon. I'll see you all tomorrow when we continue the discussion.